that really kind of disturbed the audience at the presidential debate. It was a question that went to Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. She was asked whether or not she would be a submissive wife to her husband if she was elected president. Listen to her answer.
In 2006, when you were running for Congress, you described a moment in your life when your husband said you should study for a degree in tax law. You said you hated the idea, and then you explained, quote, "But the Lord said, be submissive. Wives, you are to be submissive to your husbands." As president, would you be submissive to your husband?
What submission means to us, if that's what your question is, it means respect. I respect my husband. He's a wonderful, godly man and a great father, and he respects me as his wife. That's how we operate our marriage.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Tartt. He's a relationship expert. He's joining me now from Houston. To hear that question, what is just your reaction to hear a presidential candidate on stage getting that question?
I mean, it's a question that all women have to answer. They have to balance in that between being a career woman and also being a wife. If we talk about it from a biblical standpoint, they kind of have to wear two hats, which makes it extremely difficult because they're two different skill sets.
Well, Dr. Tartt, help me understand then, help us all understand, what is meant, and I guess it may mean different things to different people, but in your estimation, what does it mean to submit to your husband?
And see, that's the thing, is we're talking about one side of submission, but in Ephesians in the Bible, it talks about two-sided submission. So that means husbands submit to your wives and wives submit to your husbands. And how the question was posed, it sounded like oppression. And it started talking about control versus allowing your partner to influence you. And that's why it's such a hot-button issue, because when we start talking about marriages, we forget some marriages involve control and domestic violence. And so it seems like it's a mixed message in telling women to, submit to husbands that don't love their wives. But in reality, it's supposed to be a mutual influence.
Now, I'm reading here. I actually have it pulled up, and it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And it also says, yes, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands. It says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. Now, is there another place, or is that just interpreted to mean the same thing as submit to your wife?
Well, it talks about there being conditions under which women should submit to men. A man that does not love you as Christ loved the church, you should not submit to him. And that's where a lot of people get confused, is that sometimes people will be taught, or they'll be trying to coerce and say, stay with your husband even though he's beating on you, or even though he's being controlling. No, that's nowhere in the Bible, and that's nowhere within healthy relationships. What we have to do is just make sure that we love one another and we allow each partner to influence the other. You have to yield to win sometimes.
Well, maybe that's the word, because my next question was, you say people kind of misconstrue this and maybe even confuse this. So besides submission, what would you say is a better word that people could get their heads around a little better? What would you replace submit with?
I think we have to have compassion for one another, or something called binocular vision, where we're able to see the way we see it and the way our partner sees it at the same time. Marriage is about a couple. When Bachmann was talking about going back to school, I think what she was referencing was allowing her husband to influence her decision-making. At the end of the day, she decided to do that for herself, and I think it came off wrong because of the question. But it's something that women have to balance, and it's an amazing thing to, to be a woman, and that they have to go to work, but then come home and have a completely different skill set. And people don't like the word submit because it makes us think about oppression, abuse, and slavery.